Hey everybody, it's Miss Nelson. I am just here to do a demonstration of painting with brown watercolor and antiquing in oil pastel, painting slash drawing. Okay, so the tools that you will need are, of course, the oil pastel drawing itself. Crayon also works if you don't have oil pastel. So I'll be showing you how that works and looks too. And then you will need watercolors. So you might have Prang. You might have the Target brand that I sent home for you, or if you are in middle or high school, or you might have something else. But you'll need watercolors and some water, of course. You need water for your watercolors. And you also need a brush. A medium-sized brush is good, but I'm going to use a smaller one because it kind of matches the size that a lot of you have. But if you do have a medium-sized brush with a little bit bigger area on the bristles, that's good too. And then you'll also want a paper towel or a rag or a sponge, something to just get the excess water off on so that you're not just flooding your painting. All right, not all of it's going to fit in the screen, but I'll do the best I can to show you what's going on. Okay, so the first thing you do is make a choice. So you're going to use a brown for, and you can kind of see it there, it looks kind of dark in the picture, but this is just a nice normal brown. And by using brown, we're going to be able to antique the painting. And notice that I've left some of the white of the paper showing, not a lot, but some throughout. Now, if you happen to have these guys, it looks kind of weird because this is a brownish orange, and I'll show you, it's not actually that dark. Most of these are very pastel. So notice that I'm just getting my brush wet and getting some water in there, and then I paint with it. So as you can see, that's very orange, almost yellow. So a good way to think about making brown is to picture the color wheel and go for the opposites. So orange and blue are opposite on the color wheel. They're called complementary colors. And if you mix them, they make a nice brown. Now, blue is a lot stronger in pigment than orange, so we want to use a lot more orange. And always rinse your brush between colors. Get some blue in there. So when I tried that, I don't love the way it looks. Okay, next. Oh, I think this might be a brown down here, even though it looks black. Let me try that. Aha, there we go. So that's a nice brown. Now, if you have another kind of watercolor set and it doesn't match, it's not either of these two, and you don't have a brown, try mixing orange and blue. Of course, this is like not a very nice brown, but it is a brown. Try mixing some different colors on a separate sheet of paper and see if you can come up with something that makes a nice brown. Try going across the color wheel and mixing colors. Okay, so because these are oil pastels, they're very rich. I drew this with oil pastels, very rich colors. So I think I'm going to use the Prang for this demonstration. And I'm not going to, you have to make sure that you get this nice and wet. If you just get a little bit of water on your brush, but you don't actually have this pool here, you're going to have way too much paint and it's going to overwhelm your painting, okay? So you just want to make sure that you've got some brown on your brush. You might even get the excess off and then you just start painting. So, and the more times you go over it, the harder it's going to be to make it look nice because it's going to spread out the oil pastels. Oops, you can't see what I'm doing. Hello. So you don't want to go over and over and over. You just want to make sure that your brush has ink on it, or I mean paint on it, and then you just want to go over each area like once or twice total. It's going to look really weird. See how it looks like it's beading up? That is okay. That's all right. It'll dry really cool. But up here you can see I did too many layers. It's starting to kind of over blend it. So you just really don't want to mess with it too much. You just want to lay down some color and move on to the next area. So as you go, you'll get the hang of it. Just adapt. If something isn't working, change up what you're doing a little bit and keep going. No one area is going to ruin the whole painting. Even if you mess up in one area, it's okay. It'll still look cool. It is, as Bob Ross says, a happy little mistake. So as I'm doing this, I can tell that I'm going to have areas where there's just paint sitting there and it's not really going to have a place to go. So I'm just going to very carefully, I let it sit for a second, and then I'm going to go in and just kind of pick up the extra. Okay, and then trust that some of it's going to dry. All right. I'm excited about the white area down here because white is always kind of dramatic. The paint really stands out against it. So you just keep on going. Now I'm going to pause this for a second and I'm going to finish painting the whole thing and we're going to see how it looks. Okay, so I have painted over the whole thing and as you can see it looks kind of rough. It doesn't look nice yet, but I trust that it's going to. You can also see that I put more paint down than I originally planned to because I have found that the oil pastel really you need a lot of paint. So you need way more than I thought you would. And I'm just going to let this dry. And then if there's still puddles sitting on top of it, I will remove those. But you want to make sure too that there's white, wherever there's white, that you have put brown down. Okay. So wherever there's white edges, you're just going to go in, go ahead and drop some paint in there. Because that's what's going to give it that really cool antique look is of the edges too. And if you're doing this at home and you don't have something down on the table, you might want to. I am painting in my workstation, so it's okay, but you don't want to ruin anything with the paint. So the good thing is watercolor is pretty cleanable. All right, so I'm liking the way that looks. Like I said, right now it looks kind of rough, but now that I've got paint all over it, it's pooled up in areas, but it's also, I've made sure that I have spread it around into all the areas where there's white. It's kind of hard to see on the dot can, but I'm just going to go ahead and use a clean paper towel and just kind of blot up the excess. And then I am going to let it dry from there. So what you're going to have when it's all dry is an antique looking piece. And right now, yeah, it looks pretty messy, but it'll look cool. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the crayon one and see what is different about it. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm experimenting with you and it's kind of fun. All right. So in front of us, we have my crayon drawing that I did of the same image. Basically, it's a little different, but, and I'm going to do the same thing. So again, now I'm using the Target watercolors, but the first thing you want to do is get some water in there and mix it around so that you have a pool of paint that you can just keep going back to. Now, I'm just going to try this in a little corner first because I know that crayons are not as strong and thick as oil pastels, and I don't want to overwhelm. Yeah. So in this case, you actually want, with crayons, you want there to be a lot more water and less watercolor. And you don't want to paint over and over and over the same spot. So I'm learning as I go, learning and adjusting It's all part of the game here. I can probably do darker brown where there's more crayon. I know that this area right here has a ton of crayon that I put down, but over here it is less. So you can kind of see that, and what you can't see is all I'm doing is I'm getting the brush wet, getting more ink, sorry, watercolor, and then just painting with it. The brush wet, more watercolor, but there's already water in there too, and just painting with it. Okay, I want to go over all the areas where there's white, because it's supposed to look like the paper itself has aged with time and it's turned brown. Okay, so I'm going to finish this and come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I will admit that the image quality of the dot cam is not the best, and it's hard to see exactly what's going on here. But if I zoom in, you can kind of see how much watercolor I used. And I made sure to cover the whole thing, but I tried really hard not to go over any areas more than a couple strokes. Okay, because the harder you press, the more it's going to just like wipe away the crayon itself. So I'm going to let this one dry now, but I can already see some pretty cool effects going on as it's drying. I'm going to come back over to this one. So this one has, I think it's a really cool look. It's not at all what I expected, but I think it looks kind of cool. And one thing is, if I do this again, I'm going to leave more white of the paper showing, because what I've learned from this experiment is that the watercolor doesn't like to find its way when the oil pastel is close together, even if there is a gap, because it still repels it. So next time I do this, I will leave more white showing. I really like the texture that it made. It looks very painterly, and I think it looks really cool. I'm excited to see how your paintings come out, because I think some of them you're going to be really happy with, and some of them are going to look kind of like this one, where they look like there's a lot going on. But I think it's a really cool experiment. And like I said, I think it looks like an old painting. The more I look at it, the more I like it. Now on this one, we're just about dry. I'm going to go ahead and pick up some of the paint that's still hanging out. Just like so. Let me turn it over and pick up the extra down here. I'm just going to come in and... So by now, if it hasn't sunk down into the paper and there's like a little pool of it sitting somewhere, well then you know that that's not going to dry. It's just extra. So you want to dab, pick that up by dabbing. I don't mean the dance. So I actually really like this one. I like the way this one came out a lot. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on. I actually think the crayon works just as well, just in a different way. I think the crayon works well with a lighter brown. If I had used the darker brown, it might be overwhelmed. But I think that's a very cool effect. But that's up to you. Whichever one you like the best, go ahead and let me know in class. Do you like the crayon version, or do you like the oil pastel version? They each have a different look. So that's it for this project. Thank you for watching the video. I know it's a long one, but I am excited to see how your guys' paintings turn out.